Alright, Mopar people, welcome back to the channel. I'm JustMoparJoe. Finally get to start the build on the 508 made out of a 440 block. So this is a 440 sword stroker kit, and I'm going to try to give you every step that I use to build an engine. So let's go to work. Here is the block. This is a, I want to say 77 model truck block, 440-3. Hopefully you saw my other videos on this. The last video, I took this to Mr. Rick Seaman, and we were able to deck it, check the line bore, and several other things. Check out that video if you haven't seen it. So he did also finish hone it. So it's really nice and ready to go. I brought it back home and washed this sucker out every way you can imagine. All my galley plugs are out. I brushed them out thoroughly. I got a set of the Goodson brushes here from Drew. He got me those for Christmas, so they're pretty trick. In and out of every hole. The small brushes here for doing the mains, every direction that they run. So washed out, pressure washed out, blown out, brushed out again, wiped out. So she's ready to go. One thing I did do, like on my cam bearings, I have some 2000 grit sandpaper here. I just lightly went over anywhere like that, where the oil holes would be if the brush were to shove a burr up or something. So brushing over those, I can now feel it with my fingers. They've all been wiped out and they feel great. So my step number one is going to be flip the engine over and put the cam in today. So this is a hydraulic roller cam. It is actually used, but it's in really good shape if I don't roll it off the table. And it is a comp. So here's our comp numbers, 20450. And if you'll remember the comp hydraulic roller that is in my 400 over here, the cam that I'm using is exactly one size larger than that in the comp book. So let me throw the specs up for you here. There we are. So keep in mind, this is a mostly what I was considering a street stroker build. I know I've said it several times, but he's going to be able to drive it on the street, drive it to a racetrack, and hammer on it all day long, and come back and enjoy it, park it, do it all over again. That's the purpose of this build. So we are aiming for 10.5 to 1 compression heads. We got those getting shaved now down to 73 cc's. They're the Indy EZ1 heads. So let me get this thing rolled over, and hopefully you'll follow along for the entire build. It's going to be exciting stuff. My other goals for today's video, I can go ahead and get the crankshaft in. I can double check our piston deck height since this has been decked. So, okay, a couple things. These are our Trick Flow hydraulic roller lifters. There you go. Got them from 440 Source. They look to be really nice. I'm going to do a more in-depth explanation on these later, but previous to trying to put this cam in, I test fitted a set of lifters in every bore, be sure they were nice and free. The bores have been, or lifter bores have been honed previously, so I just wanted to be sure there was nothing, no burrs or anything for me brushing, and I just kind of went in and cleaned up, you know, also with a little piece of sandpaper before the final cleanup. So it's important that I mention that about the lifters. Step number 2 on our camshaft, I thoroughly cleaned that dude. So she's a lot nicer and cleaner than the first time you just saw it. And I blew out those oil holes right there. Be sure it goes all the way. But it looks to be a nice piece. I'm gonna get our block flipped over. I also have a trick cam handle that I got from a viewer. I believe it was Mr. Big and Johnson. I always try to mention him because he saw me using a long bolt before and mailed that to me. In my cup here, that is straight engine oil. And I may tell you something different in the next video, but what I like about this idea, got my little brush. I'm gonna brush each journal. And as I get that in there, I'm able to spin with my handle the camshaft, feel how sticky it is inside the bearings. If I use something like, I have this Lucas assembly lube, good thick stuff, but if it's very thick, I can't feel any catches or burrs or anything like that. I've test fit this once with, after the cleanup, with the thin viscosity stuff, but I want to go ahead now, get my brush out, brush on every one of these dudes. There we are. And I'll save my front one so it's not so nasty. There we go. But just going all the way around. Y'all know the story. Nice and slippery. And then I can run her in. Try to do that without making any kind of racket. Alright, if I get past that one, there we go. Now, get my last bit of oil for this front journal. Back to my handle. There it is. I like to give it a little spin as I'm pushing it in. Be sure my lube is working. And we're there. Feels nice. There we go. I'll leave my cam hanging out just a hair there. And that handle just spins so nicely. Feels really good. No sticky spots, anything like that. So that's nice. I have my 50/50 Lucas mix here. I'll give it a little shake. I'm going to put a little bit down every one of these holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can actually see the shininess of that journal there. Anyway, it'll run some of that thick goodness there down to those as I'm putting the crank in next. So before I do crank, I'll go ahead and get this rear surface cleaned really, really well for that rear main seal. I'll drop my bottom half. Bearings in. I've already tested those clearances in a different video, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out. And we'll have a crank in soon. So I got our main bearings dropped in. And you see my box. There's a part number included with the kit. And I labeled them before whenever I measured with the dial bore gauge. And now they're all back in their correct holes. I'm gonna take my Lucas 50/50 mix. It's 50% oil and 50% Lucas. And put me a dab on every one. Just like that. Just like that. This stuff is pretty vicious and should stay there a while. There we go. Also off camera, I cleaned up the crankshaft, checking every hole and wiping it down with a lint-free rag. It was pretty clean out of the box, but it has a little bit of kind of an oily coating or something on it. I'll be sure and get that on my thrust. There we go. That'd be good to use the Lucas assembly on the thrust faces because it is almost tacky, and I know it'll stay there, which the other stuff does too. I really like the Lucas stuff. Slow and steady. That's it. I like to give it a little spin ahead of time just to know she's free and everything is beautiful. And a little bit of, yep, right there. A little bit of dust right there. And I'll prepare my caps with my bearings. Start with the thruster. Uh-oh, take my cap off. Time out. There we go. Thruster. She's a plenty. There we go. Get in the face. And I have already coated with my ARP lube. Notch to notch, or tang to tang, however you want to say it. Drop her down, start them in. Nice and gooey. There we go. So if you'll remember, here's my How to Rebuild a Big Block Mopar book by Svensson. And they say, uh-oh, lost a card. Ensure that the main bearings fit correctly. Follow the correct torque sequence in the photo. They start in the rear. Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm not really sure if it actually matters. My entire life I've started in the center and worked my way out. But I'll do as the bolts say, so that it will be to their spec. So I'll lay my sheet of paper right here even. All right, I went ahead and put the rear main seal in since my crank was torqued down, and she still spins like butter. So I was going to show you if you wanted those part numbers. It is the 440 source stuff. A lot of stuff in this engine will be 440 source. You'll notice my crank socket, which I recently got, I can hang my degree wheel on. There's a part number for it. I always have people ask me, but it's really nice because it'll fit small block or big block Mopars. And since that's what I'm trying to continue doing forever, it works for me. I don't think it's labeled that way online, so it's good to have that part number, comp 4799. I'm going to flip her over and we can drop a rod and piston in and check that actual deck height now. All right, in order to get our piston stuck in and check that deck height, I need to mic this piston here so we can figure out what the ring gap's going to be. These are file to fit rings. So I'll show you that it's pretty well set. If I can catch it on the skirt there. And what I'm reading is 4.356. Let me get you in there so you can put your own eyes on it. There's a little bit, like I said, a little bit off from it. I went ahead and went with 4.356 to do my math. And our piston to wall clearance, 440 source give you some excellent literature on this. So general rule, they say normally aspirated street strip should be at about 5 thousandths. Drag only, other applications you can add 1 to 3 thousandths. So I think we're on the looser side, so I went ahead and said 6.5. So my 4.356 plus the 6.5 piston to wall gives me 4.36. And our total seal rings come with that literature. Basically street strip circle, multiply by 4.5 would give us 19 thousandths plus. So call it 20 thousandths. If we do it by 5 thousandths, which they give you 4.5 or 5.5. 5.5 is nitrous up to 150 horsepower. So that would only put us at, excuse me, get that out of the way. Would only put us at 22 thousandths basically if you round that up. And if you do the bigger one, I'm sorry, the 5.5, that would be 24 thousandths. So I believe 22 thousandths is what I'll be shooting for today. And that way, if he does ever put a little 100 shot on it, it's not going to hurt it. Typically, the rings will kind of seat in, the best I can tell, and everything should be fine. But I probably wouldn't want to go more than 24 thousandths just because we may be giving up a little bit of ring seal, and we don't want that. So let me get these filed away, and we'll drop a piston in soon. All right, I know I got a lot going on in this video, but in order for me to test up that number 1 rod, I'm just going to go ahead and install it. I mean, I'm basically installing all of them anyway. I got my rings filed for that one, and got my 2 to 3 inch mic out. I went and mic'd the number 1 journal. After I mic'd that journal, I locked my caliper. I locked my mic. Then I set up my dial bore gauge here. So I can now put in one of my new X bearings. Here's the part number on that. So I'm just using a half a shell because before they were a little bit tight, like under 2, several of them were. So I went ahead and bought 4 pair of these, and I'm going to use an upper and a lower in each one of the rods and open them up a little bit. So I should be over 2 thousandths clearance now. This is a, I think 2.200. Well, I can just look. 2.198. So 2.198. We'd like to have 2 1/4 if we can get it for rod clearance. So here we go. I'll try to, I torqued that up into my rod vise, but I wanted to bring it to the table. I was hoping I could film it a little bit easier. Drop her in. There we go. So I watch my needle. There's 3. It'll almost dip to 2.5. So 2.5 plus. If I had to call it anything, I'd call it 0.0026. But that's exactly what I wanted. We're over 2 thousandths, under 3 thousandths. So that's what I needed to know. That's my rod A. I did weigh all the rods, and we weighed all the pistons, and they were all within like 1/10 of a gram. I'm sorry. They were all within 1 gram lightest to heaviest totals. So that tells me I can basically match them up any way that I'd like to. There's no need in me trying to swap back and forth. These are a lot nicer parts than what I have in my 400. So they did a fine job machining that stuff. So we'll get number 1 installed here, and then we'll be able to see our deck height. So that's exciting stuff. The rings are on. I went ahead and used the Total Seal instruction manual, the front of the engine, and then I had my red marker, as I usually do, and I mark where my gaps go. My oil ring, you'll see, points up right there. I'm going to go ahead and double check, be sure I'm lined up on my marks. I find it a little bit easier. So you see my red mark here puts the bottom oil ring away from the other. And the compression rings are about 180 opposite of each other. One here, number 2, and I'm going to slide that one back around. Got our number 1 piston in. Everything is beautiful. This is the best straight edge that I have. It's an old flexible stainless steel ruler made in the USA. I would call that 0 deck. Now that I've got number 1 in, next step, we can get our cam degreed and put on the 440 source timing chain set. So hopefully y'all come back for that. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll catch you next time.